All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are taking on a massive, centuries-old theological mystery, and we're going to do it by playing linguistic detective. For hundreds of years, people have fiercely debated these apparent contradictions between the words of Jesus and the proclamations of Muhammad. But what if the conflict isn't actually in the texts themselves? What if the real culprit is just bad translation and careless grammar? Well, today, we are going to dig into the original Greek, the original Arabic, and the formal language of early church councils to see what happens when we finally stop throwing sloppy English summaries at each other.
To kick things off, we've got to set a ground rule for reading ancient texts. As the scholar Toshihiko Izutsu so brilliantly points out, a text like the Quran creates its own unique world of concepts. Its words only really make sense inside that specific structural system. You can't just cherry-pick a word, strip away its context, and Frankenstein it into a totally different theological framework. When you ignore the system a word lives in, you're guaranteed to get massive miscommunication.
And this brings us to the very real danger of what philosophers call a category error. Think about the word bank. Imagine two people arguing, right? One says they're standing by the bank, meaning the edge of a river. The other insists that's impossible because a bank is a brick building where you deposit checks. If we assume identical meanings across entirely different contexts, we invent fake arguments. We end up shadow boxing with ghosts made out of bad grammar. And this paper argues that a lot of the famous disagreements between Christianity and Islam happen for exactly this reason.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is defining what an actual contradiction is. We cannot rely on English shortcuts. According to classical logic, a formal contradiction only exists if the exact same predicate is applied to the exact same subject in the exact same sense. So, if a word means one thing in Greek, and an English translator uses a word that means something slightly different to translate the Arabic, well, we don't have a theological contradiction. We literally just have a translation error. This is our golden rule for the rest of this explainer.
Okay, case study 1, father versus begetting. Let's throw these two concepts right under the semantic microscope.
In English, these two concepts seem to collide head-on, but let's actually look at the original languages. Jesus consistently uses the Greek noun pater. Now, in ordinary Greek, sure, this can mean a biological father, but its semantic range is way broader than that. It means relational source, origin, protector, or guide. Jesus uses it to describe a relationship of total obedience, revelation, and care. The Quran, on the flip side, emphatically denies that God begets. But the Arabic verb used there is yalid, which specifically refers to biological generation, literally, the physical production of offspring. So Jesus affirms a relational source, while Muhammad denies a biological, creaturely generation. These are entirely different predicates.
That's a lot of linguistics, so let's relieve the cognitive load a bit with a simpler analogy. Imagine a kid saying, "My dad is my coach." If another kid fires back, coaches don't give birth to soccer players," they are technically correct, but they are completely missing the point. The word dad doesn't automatically mean biological maker in every single sentence. It can mean protector, teacher, and guide.
We can apply that exact same linguistic test to the words son and offspring. In the Greek New Testament, the word huios can mean biological descent, absolutely. But it heavily denotes an heir, a representative, or someone in a relationship of perfect reception and obedience. The Quran rejects that God has a walid, which strictly means biological offspring in the ordinary creaturely sense. Once again, Greek relational sonship is just not in the same category as Arabic biological offspring.
Think of it like a drama teacher saying, "She's my theater daughter." Obviously, that doesn't mean the teacher literally gave birth backstage between acts. It just proves that deep, relational, formative connections do not require a literal biological birth. When Jesus is called son, it means he perfectly receives and reveals the Father's action. It definitely doesn't mean God produced a physical baby the way creatures do.
Moving on to Section 2, Defining Divinity and Trinity. This is where people usually assume the absolute biggest contradictions lie.
Now here is a fascinating twist. Both texts explicitly reject the exact same error, tritheism, or the belief in three gods. The Quran warns against saying three and rejects describing Allah as a third of three, actively forbidding the idea that God is just one member of some divine committee. But if we look at the Council of Nicaea, the formal Christian definition of the Trinity, it also explicitly rejects three gods. Nicaea confesses one God. The creed was written precisely to prevent treating the Son as a separate rival deity.
Here is a playful but really clear way to separate the grammar here. Imagine someone says, "Hey, don't bring 3 dogs into the house." And someone else says, "But this is one dog with 3 names, Fluffy, Mr. Wiggles, and Supreme Commander Barkface." Saying 3 separate dogs versus 1 dog named distinctly are completely different grammatical claims. The Quran rejects adding rival partners next to God. Nicaea says Christians do not believe in 3 gods but 1 God. They are guarding totally different conceptual doors against entirely different misunderstandings.
And this brilliant semantic discipline applies directly to the word begotten as well. Nicaea famously says Jesus is begotten, not made. Now, in modern English, begotten sounds super biological. But Nicaea used not made as a specific formula to explicitly prevent people from treating Jesus as a manufactured creature. It's all about eternal relational origin, like light coming from light. It is absolutely not a claim that God biologically produced a child, which, you guessed it, is exactly the creaturely reproduction the Quran is rejecting.
All right, Section 3, the crucifixion problem. Let's look at this whole issue of agency.
At first glance, this one looks like a literal head-on historical collision. The Gospels say Jesus was killed, the Quran says his enemies did not kill him. So how on earth does semantic analysis handle this? Well, we have to make sure we're asking the right question. Are these texts debating the physical, visible event, or are they engaged in a much deeper dispute over ultimate agency, mastery, and recognition? If we read closely, both texts are actually incredibly precise about what is being denied.
The crucial point here is tracing the agency. In the Gospel of John, Jesus explicitly says, "No one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord." Jesus flat out denies that his enemies have ultimate control over him. In the Quran, the verse denying the crucifixion starts with a boast from the enemies. They say, "We killed the Messiah," and the Quran is actively clapping back at that specific boast. Both Jesus and the Quran explicitly reject the idea that hostile human enemies somehow achieved ultimate mastery, ownership, or control over him.
Picture this. A bully knocks over your incredibly detailed Lego castle and shouts, "Ha! I destroyed your kingdom." But secretly, you built that castle specifically to fold into a spaceship, and now your Lego people are blasting off. Did the bully knock something over? Yes. Did the bully understand what actually happened? No. Did the bully win? Absolutely not. There's a vast difference between causing a physical event and actually controlling its ultimate purpose.
We also have to be really disciplined about pronouns here. The Quran says, "They did not kill him." Grammatically, him refers to the person. It doesn't automatically just mean his physical body. Even in formal Catholic doctrine, there is a strict separation between the physical suffering of the body on the cross and the ultimate defeat of the person. Jesus' body is crucified, yes, but his divine person is never possessed or conquered by his enemies.
Let's unpack how the Quran describes the folks watching this go down. The text outlines a really specific epistemic progression around the phrase "shubiha lahum," meaning it was made to appear so to them. The text moves from the enemy boast to a denial, then to mere appearance, doubt, conjecture, and finally a complete lack of certainty. The text is heavily emphasizing the absolute limits of human perception here. It focuses on the fact that the people watching simply did not truly understand what they were looking at.
And you know what? This epistemic progression parallels the Gospel of John perfectly. Think of doubting Thomas or Mary Magdalene at the tomb. John's Gospel repeatedly hammers home the point that simply seeing an event with your physical eyeballs is completely different from actually recognizing its truth. In both texts, human beings witness a profound, sacred reality, but without correct reception and faith, they totally, hopelessly misinterpret it.
It's literally like looking everywhere for your glasses while they're sitting right on your face. Your eyes are working perfectly fine, but your brain just hasn't caught up yet. Physical observation is never the finish line for truth. Both Jesus and Muhammad insist that recognizing divine truth requires way more than just superficial eyesight. It requires true spiritual recognition.
So, when we bring all of this together on the formal semantic roadmap, the results are honestly pretty striking. By applying strict linguistic discipline, when we finally stop forcing sloppy English definitions onto ancient Greek and Arabic words, almost all of these supposed contradictions just vanish. Father does not mean biological begetter, son does not mean offspring, divine does not mean rival God, and enemy action does not equal ultimate mastery.
So, let's summarize what we've uncovered in this investigation. Muhammad protects divine unity from false multiplication and creaturely begetting. Jesus reveals a filial relation, an obedient mission, and the Father's grammar. Nicaea protects that specific relation from being misunderstood as createdness or separation. These texts are not necessarily enemies at all. They actually operate as distinct, powerful safeguards built around a single, profound mystery.
Which leads us to one final, huge thought. If applying careful, disciplined linguistics can reconcile such massive historical divisions, we really have to ask ourselves, what if history's greatest theological war was actually just a war of misunderstood words? And hey, if that's true here, where else in the world are we currently fighting over sentences that were never actually opposites to begin with? Something to think about. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.